Welcome to Breaking Bread. Join us as we talk about leadership and building different skills. Do stay connected with us on social media. We're on Instagram at Breaking Bread USA and on Facebook, Breaking Bread Nonprofit. So let's get to it. We're here breaking bread with Kristen Adamo, President of the Providence-Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Hello.
Hello. So we are kicking things off here with Breaking Bread, and so thrilled to have Kristen Adamo with us. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you kidding me? We've been counting down to this.
So good. Me too.
This is really exciting. So, Kristen, before we really get into the nitty-gritty of our fabulous conversation,
Sure.
Tell us what do you do? Because there's a lot that you do. Tell us what you do.
It certainly feels that way. I am the president and CEO of Go Providence, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Very quickly, what we do is we run the Rhode Island Sports Commission. So we book sporting events all over the state. We book meetings and conventions in mostly Providence and Warwick, but around the state as well. And that's usually about 270 events a year, and it means about $100 million for the Rhode Island economy. And then on the side, we market Providence as a leisure destination. So for people who want to come and vacation.
So $115 million.
$100 million.
$100 million.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, still nothing to sneeze
And
at.
that's just the meeting sector. I mean,
Correct.
the leisure sector is even more. About 4 million people a year just come to Providence alone. So tourism is a big business in this state.
Yeah. Tourism is amazing, right? I think people don't always realize the impact that tourism can have. I love the way you sort of set us off with the broader impact on the state, but then even when you think of the people who are working in the industry, there's such a huge impact on people's lives and their careers.
I mean, we work with hotels and restaurants and theaters and attractions, but we work with things that you wouldn't even imagine, like transportation companies, printers, things like that, because the tourism economy has a ripple effect, and it really touches a lot of different businesses.
Yeah. You've got the person printing menus. You've got the person delivering linen. You've got the person bringing in the vegetables. You've got the person driving and delivering things. So it's a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. But let's talk about food, because that's our favorite part of it.
That is our favorite part. You and I share a common background. We worked at Johnson & Wales for many years, and so we know a little bit about this topic.
A little bit about food. I'm going to do what people do, and I don't like when they do it, which is asking somebody, what's your absolute favorite thing to eat? Because I don't think that I could narrow it down. I think sometimes you're in the mood for something comforting. Sometimes you want to try something new. Today happens to be a Friday. What are you in the mood for dinner tonight?
So I have this, I think that when you talk about the notion of comfort food, I think it depends on your culture.
Yeah.
So what you might view as comfort food is very different than what I view as comfort food. So I'm just getting over a cold. So I've been joking with my friend who owns Angelo's, and I'm going to go up for pastine, because what pastine is, we call it Italian penicillin. It's a soup that your grandmother or mother would make when you were sick. So for me, I'm going to go up and get a little bit of comfort food and get some pastine.
I love it. That's awesome. I think you're spot on. I think it's just it's not just the flavor and the impact it's having on your body, right? But it's what memories it might bring back.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
you.
food is emotional.
Food is emotional.
It involves a lot of the senses. You can smell it, you can taste it, you can touch it, you can look at it. So it's got a very deep connection with people, and that's why people are so passionate about it.
I'm smiling when you said the senses, because we were filming some more content for Breaking Bread, and that is exactly how I describe it. It engages all of your senses. Which is why I keep reminding myself to put my phone down when I'm eating and be in the moment and enjoy it, because it really can engage all your senses.
Absolutely.
So we love, food, senses. You've got these beautiful plates that come out of a restaurant, or you've got this comforting bowl of soup. And obviously there is that tangible element, right? But then there's the other element, the intangible element of the people
Yes.
who are creating that. And one of the things we're really excited about with Breaking Bread is helping individuals who have somehow found their way to the industry, whether they meant to or whether they just fell into it. And we want them to fall in love with it and see how much potential there is to grow within this industry. But growing into a leadership role is never easy.
No.
Now, we kind of just started off talking to you, but what I neglected to mention is you are the president of the Providence-Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau. That's a huge title. So for those who are aspiring, and maybe folks are not aspiring to be a president, but aspiring to make it from that first level of their job into the first management job, right? Or the next management job, or whatever it might be. Can you think back to your journey? Let's talk leadership.
Sure.
Are there leaders who inspired you, or maybe leaders who inspired you to not do something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the reasons that I've been able to achieve what I've been able to is because I've always had a network of mentors. And I think, I think that the easy thing is to say, oh, all these women lifted me up. And they did. But I've also had strong male mentors as well. And I think they fluctuate on what you need at different points in your career. But I feel like I learned something different from each of the people that were generous with their time with me. And so I try to give that back now, not just to the young women, although I have to admit, I do take a special interest because I think we as women have to work harder and smarter and have to take the advantages where we see it. But I try to really work with our young people. I'll give you an example. There's a young man on our staff who prepares all the reports that we do for this monthly big meeting at the convention center, and his boss can't go. And so I said, why don't you come with me so that you can see how the work that you do carries through? Yeah. And so it's a great opportunity for him to see why his work, even though, it's not at a managerial level, is still really valuable. So those are the kinds of things I think you have to do. And those are the kinds of things people did for me.
And they set you up to do things that maybe you didn't even know you were ready for, and you're sort of doing that now for your team, which I think is great, because isn't that what this is all about, right? As a leader, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But the best way to learn is to be in that position, and sometimes we learn best from our mistakes.
I agree. I think no one is perfect, and so you can't be too hard on yourself. I tend to do that. I will obsess about like every little thing, especially things like public speaking. You'll be like, oh, I should have said that one phrase differently or whatever. And but you have to be a little kinder to yourself and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. Oh, beating up on yourself. I mean, gosh, we could have an entire session just on that, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes I wonder, a lot of it can come from a place of continuous improvement or, as you say, being the best version of yourself, right? But I think we do need to know when to stop beating up on ourselves and saying, no, this is fantastic. Right. Look at where you wanted to be. Would, the you from 5 years ago be proud of the you today?
Sure. And I think people suffer from, imposter syndrome. Yeah. I remember reading an article with Viola Davis, and she was talking about how she suffers from that. And I was like, oh my God, you're Viola Davis. Like, how does that happen to you? But I think it happens to a lot of people. And it takes a lot of work to remember that you belong here.
Yes.
So
you just finishing each other's sandwiches. I love that book. I don't know if you're talking about the same book, but she does talk about going back to Viola from third grade.
Yeah.
And I think of that a lot of times, Akanksha from third grade, the new kid in school.
Yeah.
A lot of times I think, regardless of where we might be today, there can be moments where you feel like you don't belong.
Absolutely. I think everyone feels that way at some point. I think it's part of human nature. And you like I actually I go to a lot of events for work, and I can't say get nervous, but I'm always a little anxious about going to a big event. Who am I going to talk to, and is anyone I'm going to know going to be there? And I go to events like 3 a week. But I think that you can't let those kinds of things stop you. You have to kind of forge ahead.
You have to just do it. You have to just do it. I love that. I think this is going to be great for folks to hear because, if you take a look at any, buddy who's in a position like yours and you see the Instagram feeds and you see the LinkedIn feeds, and you're like, oh my gosh, she's doing it all. But guess what? You also feel sometimes like you don't belong. So not feeling like you don't belong shouldn't stop you. You just have to keep doing things. Do you feel like you focus more on your strengths or on sort of working on your opportunities? Because I feel like that's the age-old question that people keep going back to.
Well, for me, I'm a leader of a team. And so for a team to be successful, I think you have to focus on your strengths and your weaknesses and then hire people to make up for your weaknesses. And that's how I've always approached it. My style of leadership is very collaborative, and I tend to be a big picture thinker, a strategic planner, a creative personality, which is a whole other can of worms for a lot of people. So I like to surround myself with people who are detail-oriented, data-driven, analytical, because then we balance each other out. So I don't know that I focus as much as my strengths. I focus on my weaknesses and how to make up for them and take an honest look at myself, because that's the other thing I think sometimes people suffer with is, particularly in leadership roles, they'll be like, well, I can do everything. Well, you can't. No. You're not good at everything. No one's good at everything. So you have to really look at being collaborative and hiring people who you trust.
Right. Yeah. So you're telling me I should not send you the Excel spreadsheet that's color-coded?
No, I won't read it. I won't read it.
That's great.
What I will do, though, is I will send it to my senior vice president and say, this is one of my phrases. I'm like, just bottom line that for me.
Perfect.
Just bottom line. I have no idea what this is.
That's perfect. But that's a skill. Bottom lining things is a skill. And I think a lot of times for folks who might still be early on in their career, right, and you're very detail-oriented, you need that. You need that in certain roles. But as you're looking to grow, what brought you to that first management or director type position may not be enough to take you to that next level.
No, and that's about developing new skills, because you're always learning, and there are skills that you never knew you had. Like a lot of the work that I do now is with government relations, and I never did that really until I was the CEO, but I had a background in media relations and talking to people and working in advancement, fundraising. So I had some of the skills, so I was able to take those and turn them into being able to be successful at working with state and local government.
That's great. I love that. I think there's so much. I'm just trying to capture all of these awesome gems that you're throwing at us. It's okay if you feel like you don't belong.
Yes, of course.
It is actually a good thing not to try to do it all, but to ensure that you are self-aware of your strengths, of your weaknesses or opportunities or whatever we may call them, and ensuring that you are surrounding yourself with folks who compliment you.
Yes.
I also love what you said about trust. That doesn't just happen.
No, and that's a very hard thing for some leaders, and that's why they micromanage. I've worked in companies that have done that, and I've worked with people who have done that. And if you're micromanaging, then you're probably not the best leader, because you haven't developed the skills in your staff and you don't trust them.
Right.
So for me, it's always, hire the best people that you can. And sometimes I'll hire people if they don't have the particular skill set, but they fit into the culture or they show a willingness to learn. Or one of the things I always look for when I'm hiring someone is actually experience in the restaurant or hotel industry or even retail, because I don't know that you can do the work that we do if you've never experienced the front lines.
That's right.
So there's things that really, make a difference when you're looking at putting a team together.
I love that. I think the willingness to learn is a huge one, because if people are willing to learn, are able to put in the time, the energy, the honesty, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
When you're an adult and you're learning something, that's very hard, because some of it is also being vulnerable, being humble, and realizing, oh, this might take me out of my comfort zone.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right.
Because I'm going to grow through that.
Well, and I think that's where sometimes the age dynamic is really interesting. I know in my work, like, I'm not up on every little social media thing. So I actually look for younger employees or people who are well-versed and be like, explain TikTok. Why do we need to be on TikTok? It's annoying. And they'll be like, no, we have to be on TikTok, and here's why. And so I think that, and that's a skill that maybe you have just because you play with your phone all the time, but it's a skill that can translate into business.
Yeah.
So, but for me, that's, I think that's part of it, is you have to be a lifelong learner.
Yes. I think I would agree with you with as many leaders that I have also worked or observed. One of the things I love to do is like observe leaders, which might sound weird as I say it out loud, but that is one thing I have consistently seen. I have seen leaders who have different communication styles, different passions, different levels of what they might focus in on. But I think they're all strategic and they're all lifelong learners. Yeah. That seems to be a common thread.
And I think it's as the culture is changing, you have to be a learner. And, we have one employee who is non-binary, and I've learned a lot just by making sure they feel seen and comfortable. Or, you might have we used to have an employee who was a veteran, and I learned a lot about, how they approach everything in a very military way, and that's a very different skill set. So I like to learn from my team.
My father was in the military, and so I think for me, this sense of being early to everything creates my own sense of anxiety, because if my mom and I were not ready, he would leave. And he would tell us why, because when he was a major, right, he had to be there before the colonel. When he was the colonel, he had to be there before the brigadier. And then finally, when he was a major general, I'm like, well, what's your excuse now? Why are we rushing out the door? He said, well, because there's probably a bunch of people waiting for us to be there. Yeah. And I want to respect their time.
Yeah. That's a great skill to learn. I am the exact opposite. I'm late for everything. But it's selfish. And so it's something I work on, but I'm terrible.
No, I think you're self-aware. So we'll take that.
Okay, good.
You're self-aware. That's good. And now I know how to invite you to things.
Yes, if you want me there for 5 o'clock, I would go with a solid 4:30, because I will be there at 5 on the dot.
That's awesome. I do want to go back to what you said about veterans or individuals who might be non-binary, or just folks from various identities and experiences, because I think when we look at teams, and teams that will continue to be more diverse than ever before, that belonging becomes even more important, right? Because if I keep trying to hide the fact that I have an accent, or that I am different in any way, and I say different because we're all different. We all have things that make us who we are. But if I keep putting my energy into that, then number one, I'm not belonging. And number two, I'm going to be really conscious of what ideas I might bring up, or even trust.
So it's about, as a leader, one of the things that you have to do is set the tone for your culture. Yeah. And you can do that in a lot of ways. But in my experience, I think that if you develop a culture that is positive and productive and accepting, then the work follows. Something so small that I did when I became CEO was that I let everyone wear jeans. when they didn't have to meet with a client or, all of that. So I said, you know what, we're all adults. You understand what proper dress is. But we're gonna wear jeans. That was like the biggest deal. Or little things like, where we park is not close to our building. And at the time of year we're filming this, it gets dark at 4:30. So that makes me nervous about people walking through the city at night in the dark. So we have a policy of, those couple months you can park closer to the building. And that meant a lot to people. And it's, at the end of the day, it's going to be a couple $1,000s, but they're going to make it up because they're engaged. They're happy. They're not going to quit. They'll say, oh my God, I don't have to rush out of here because I don't have to walk in the dark. I'm going to finish this thing and then I'll leave.
That's great. It almost brings me back to like that old sort of, Maslow's hierarchy. If you're not feeling safe, then that becomes the focus for you. If you're not feeling seen or heard, then that becomes a focus for you. So if your sort of basic needs are not being met, how can you be creative or productive or any of those? So that's awesome.
And it's about instilling a team culture because we have a sales force and we have an in-house marketing agency. And those are two teams that have to work together well. And if someone doesn't feel like they're being heard or seen, or if they feel like they can't express ideas, then we're not doing our job.
Right. Take us back, Kristen, to a time when you were making that next jump, or maybe it was while you were already in the president and CEO role, and it was a challenging assignment. But one thing that I think can be a little hard for individuals to do is advocating for themselves. And doing it in a way that feels authentic to them. And it can be a hard balance to advocate. I mean, I see a lot of people, and I will say to a great extent, it is women. Oftentimes it's Black and brown women. But I think in women in general, it can be hard to advocate for yourself. You're great at advocating for everybody else.
Right.
Any tips on that?
Sure. I'll give you a great example. So I became the CEO. I've been at this organization for about 20 years, but I became the CEO in late 2019. And as everyone knows, the pandemic happened in early 2020. So I was, even though I had experience in the organization, I was very green. And some of my board was very nervous about me steering the ship through the pandemic. And while they were helpful, I think that they might have wanted to make decisions that really were the realm of the CEO. And I pushed back. And I said, you hired me to do a job. I want you to advise me. I need your help, but you have to give me a shot at doing this. And then, 2 years later, when the pandemic was over, I had a fully engaged board. We had to make some sad decisions and lay a lot of people off. We got almost everyone back. We were financially stable. I mean, the pandemic was the worst time in the industry, but it was also a great lesson. And I found strength in the pandemic because I had to. And then I utilized skills I already had. Like my background is in communications. So for me, it was like, okay, what can I do to save everybody? What can I do to save everything? And that's how we really got started in, reaching out to people, using the media, communicating to thought leaders. And as a result, we are very much a part of the community conversation in a way that we never were before.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about people who want to grow and how they can do that.
So I think one of the things that you need to do is really advocate for yourself if you want a leadership position, because a lot of times, especially if you're happy and productive, your supervisor might not know that you want to do more, or especially if you want to do something different.
Right.
So I think it's always great. It's not like you're going in and demanding a raise or whatever, but you say, hey, you know what? I love my job. I love this company. I see myself here for the future, and I would love to advance. And then that sort of puts your boss on notice that this is something that you really, really are looking to do. And it just, so you keep that I keep that in the back of my head. The other thing is to look for training opportunities. I have someone who works for me right now who really wants to do more. And we worked with her, and she just was accepted into Leadership Rhode Island. And we are paying, we can't really pay for all of it, but we're paying for the bulk of it, because that helps her to grow, but it also helps the company.
Right.
Because you've got someone who now has built up these leadership skills and has these connections. So I think anytime you can get leadership opportunities or opportunities to educate yourself, you should really take them.
That's great. So notes for individuals who want to grow: build the trust with your leader. Let your intentions be known.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes is such a fundamental thing that people don't realize.
Right.
And just as you may not realize what leadership skills you need to develop, your boss may not realize that you're looking to do something else or looking to get into that next step because you've never stated that.
Right.
And then realizing what you may have to do in order to get to that. But beyond all of that, right, it's also great for people to understand you need a leader who leads with heart like you.
Yeah, you do.
And a culture.
Yeah.
And sometimes, would you agree, if you've done all of that, and maybe sometimes it's not the right time, right? But let's say you've put in the effort, you've put in the work, you've put in the hours, and you're not seeing that. Sometimes it might also just be time for change.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes, particularly in an organization that's smaller and you have people that have been in their roles a long time, there might not be a window.
Yeah. I think, someone gave me this great advice that they look at their resume every birthday.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Isn't that a great idea? And I don't know that I necessarily look at my resume, but I do think about, okay, what did I say I wanted to do?
Right.
And have I done that?
Right.
And balancing that sort of lifelong learning with the other thing we were talking about, which is not beating up on yourself all the time, and to say, did I take the first step?
Right. And not beating up on yourself doesn't mean you shouldn't challenge yourself.
Thank you.
Because, I always, there's nowhere else to go in this organization, but I love this organization. So I look for things that are interesting to me, that excite me, that keep me challenged, and push the boundaries of the organization in a different direction. One of the things we're really talking about right now is being a good community partner and helping to better the city, because if you have a thriving, bustling city, that's not just good for residents, that's good for visitors. So one of the things that we've been really working on is stewardship and managing the destination. And we get involved in everything from safety to transportation to workforce development, because it's important to be part of the solution to some of the things that are happening, not just in this city, but cities across the country. My peers are doing the same thing.
That's great. Well, I'll be the first to validate what you're saying, because we are thrilled to have your support for Breaking Bread, and workforce development is very much what we're passionate about.
Right.
I found my way into hospitality as a teenager and never left. I think a lot of us in this industry, whether you were someone who really wanted to be a cook or a chef or a creator or a problem solver, and realized that, as a restaurant manager, I love that I can come into all of these problems and solve them. Or as a owner of a restaurant, and even if it's a smaller, food truck with big dreams, come in and help people just feel great about what they consume. There's so much to be said about this industry.
The thing I love about this industry is it can fit. If you're not like someone who likes to work at a desk for 8 hours, there's still a place for you. I always think of my little brother. little brother. He's a fully grown man. But as a kid, he was like, you could never get him up for school. He would sleep to noon on weekends. He was just not a morning person. But he found his niche in the hospitality industry because you can start later and you can, it's a different, he's not at a desk, he's a hotel GM now. So, I mean, he does go in early now, but he was able to find his place because he could find a spot in the industry that was right for what he liked to do and how he liked to do it.
Well, there's room for everyone in this industry, and I think there's also room for growth.
Sure.
And you really helped us today unpack a lot of what it takes to not only advocate for yourself, challenge yourself, be self-aware as you're growing, but also if you are then in a leadership role, understanding the, I don't know if it was Superman or Spider-Man who said, with great power comes great responsibility.
I think it was Spider-Man.
I'm pretty sure it was Spider-Man. We're Marvel people, so I think it was Spider-Man.
Okay.
But it is great responsibility, right?
I mean, you have a responsibility to your staff to make sure that you give them the tools they need to perform at their best, whether that is letting them wear jeans or giving them more training or working from home one day or a couple of days a week, whatever it takes to make sure that they're working to the best of their ability. That's kind of on the leader.
You haven't said this, but if I may share, one thing that I really appreciate about you as well, Kristen, is you're present and you're in that moment. This was also something that I picked up from my dad, and I kind of observed that in leaders, and you're always like fully in tune and listening. And it's amazing because it's only through that, only through that, clearly you have a ridiculous amount of skills, but that's a key skill to be able to then connect the dots and connect people and make that strategic magic happen.
Yeah, I think it's listening. I think it's empathy. Like, you have to be able to put yourself in someone's shoes. And remember that, like, when you're in an office or a kitchen or whatever, people are bringing their outside life with them. And you have to kind of like figure that out. And sometimes, people go through tough times. You lose a parent, you lose, a sibling, you get divorced, you have whatever. And so you have to be empathetic to a point, and really look at where people are coming from. And then the other part of listening, particularly with young people, is they need to feel heard. Especially young people. I'll take a good idea from anyone. I don't care. Some of our best ideas have come from the person who might have been the receptionist, or it might have been an intern. You know what I mean? So I think if you give people your attention, they feel more compelled to give you their ideas.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Just being in the moment, being present, listening. I love that. Well, Kristen, thank you so much, because we are really hoping that these opportunities for us to break bread with leaders who represent different areas can help.
Yeah.
And really appreciate this.
Anytime.
Thank you.
You're welcome.